Hey y'all, welcome and welcome back. If you're new here, my name is Morgan, and here we do a little bit of all things creepy, but today specifically, and for the next few days probably, we are doing nothing but reading scary stories that you guys have sent in to me. So with that being said, and on that note, please send me your stories. You can send them to this email. I will also put it down in the description below, along with my other social media links and podcast episode links. We did take a little break on the podcast. You can watch the old episodes while we gear up some new ones. But with all that being said, I guess we can get into some stories. So I've got many stories, especially from my childhood. I've always been sensitive to spirits and stuff like that. I'd often see apparitions when I was on a swing that was by our house we moved to later. It was always really creepy because I like to swing myself very high, so when I saw an apparition, I wouldn't just jump off the swing because of some medical problems I had. I'd often hear the basic stuff, like someone calling my name when I was home alone, or just plain tapping, whispering, or strange inhuman sounds. When I was just about 2 months, my mother put a toy on a shelf that I couldn't reach it, and she left to welcome our guests. She said that when she came back, she found me playing with that toy. Mind you, that shelf was around her height, and I couldn't even walk. Oftentimes, I'd see passing spirits. Some were creepy, but some were nice. For instance, me and my friend at the time had a toy cat, and somehow we made it really distorted to the point that it's not even recognizable as a cat sound. We were just messing around and bought a spirit box because we were both interested in that stuff. The first thing we hear is that exact sound that half-broken toy cat made. I knew exactly that this was the spirit of a small girl that was hanging out with us from that time. It lasted only about a few weeks, and I've never felt her again. One time I was in my garden, and behind me I'd see a tall, what looked like old-fashioned man, but he didn't have a head. He had just the purest black mist I'd ever seen. It was as if black ink spilled into a drawing. It's hard to describe, but I could almost feel numbness coming from it. To be honest, I've grown really used to this stuff. But firstly, I'd like to tell you what traumatized me in that second house that I lived in, and then go to the most haunted first house. So we have a giant garden behind the house, and my parents were usually outside, especially in the summer. Not to say that I wasn't with them, but at the time I had those medical problems, and it was evening, which meant that my favorite cartoons were playing. So they left me inside, and I was watching while eating a very good pudding. I was done eating. The sun had almost set, and I started to get a weird feeling. The living room I was sitting in was by a staircase that led to my parents' room. I always had a terrible feeling looking up those stairs, but this time it felt unusually empty and full at the same time. I can't explain it quite well, but it felt like I was totally alone, but also there was something with me. That's kind of the same way you described the, shadow where it looked like ink spilled out. So I ignored it for some time, but my chair was aggressively pushed, and with it, I froze completely and started crying because I never experienced something physical like this. Then somehow I rush outside safely and forget about this memory until a few months ago. But perhaps the most traumatic experience I had was when I was around 6 in that first house. It was a hot summer night, and I was trying to fall asleep, but just couldn't. I heard my parents arguing, and at this point it wasn't anything unusual. I couldn't hear them clearly, though, so I got up to hide behind a wall in the living room where they were. In the hall I was standing, there was an attic door, which was open. I hadn't really paid much attention to it, as I was trying to listen to what my parents were saying to each other. It was a quiet night, well, except for my parents. But that I couldn't hear anything from the outside despite many windows being open. No sound, which usually would hear crickets. I felt like someone was breathing on my neck, and I freeze in fear. I knew someone or something was behind me. I turn, and the first thing that I see is a humanoid creature hanging from the attic. I can only see half of its body, but its twisted arms were reaching down as if it were standing on them. Its eyes piercing through me as if I were prey. It also had long hair that was brushing its arms. We make eye contact for a split second, which seemed like years. I immediately start crying and ran to my parents, screaming that it was in the attic. My father rushed there, and he was screaming something while my mother held me. They both didn't question a thing. Without packing our things or anything, my mother and I ran to the car, and she drove off to Granny's. So I've always had nightmares where this guy who had a snake head as his head, or where my skin was falling off as a child. I'd often see weird shit like this, and as I remember, this stuff happened even before I knew how to talk. My mother used to tell me about it. I've always felt this dark presence around me as a child up to recent years, and I think that apparition might have been it. Now, I work with a few gods, and I gotta say that nothing similar has ever happened to me since, though sometimes I still see passing spirits that sometimes scare me, but I really don't mind. Though I wonder just how powerful that thing was. I was seriously ill all throughout my childhood, and doctors always said that I'm alright. I don't have any of those problems now, so I don't know. Maybe a really stupid connection, but I always wondered why I had those medical issues. That is not a stupid connection. Things of that magnitude of negativity can cause you to fall ill. I don't know what kind of medical conditions you have, but that is absolutely a thing. You gotta think, these things have energy because they take energy, you know? They get more energy, they get more powerful, and it seems like it was taking energy from you. I am curious. I don't know much about dreams. I'm trying to research more. Some little typing ASMR. Okay. Dreaming about your skin falling off can be a disturbing experience. No shit. And its meaning can vary depending on the specific details of your personal circumstance. One is transformation and change, like a snake shedding its skin. The dream would symbolize personal growth. Vulnerability and exposure. Skin acts as a protective barrier. Dreaming of it falling off might indicate feelings of vulnerability. Stress and anxiety. Could be that. Feeling restricted. Letting go of the old. Okay. Feels like the vulnerability and exposure, or maybe stress and anxiety. So that was just like an unfortunate side effect of everything that you were experiencing. So also another note, I know you said you didn't know what your parents were fighting about. The fact that they got up and left so quickly, what if they were fighting about them experiencing stuff in the house and wanting to leave? Did they say anything about that? All right, anyways, next story. So this takes place at my mom's house in Ohio. For a little background, I was around 5 to 6 years old, and my family and I every summer would throw what we called a hog roast. It's when you get a full pig and cook it like a rotisserie chicken on a roaster. I have always wanted to do that. I have seen it done in so many movies. I genuinely didn't know it actually happened. We typically would have a bunch of family and friends over, and it would last until the late hours of the night. We're talking witching hours late. So myself, my cousins, and a couple of family friends were playing a game called Ghost in the Graveyard. It's very similar to hide and seek, however the ghost has to try and tag as many people before being spotted. Wherever they were, someone would call out Ghost in the Graveyard, and everyone would take off. So I was the ghost, and I was looking for anybody to tag. I heard my name behind me and turned to nobody being there, but I could see 20 different children shape shadows on the walls of the house. Being 5 to 6 years old, I was scared, so I ran to the backyard. I was looking in the windows of the car, I don't know, but something told me to, and I saw a demonic face in the window and screamed. I unfortunately don't remember much else, but my mom told me that I was screaming in a language that she didn't know, and then in perfect English said, "The devil will kill us all," and passed out cold until the next day. When I saw my mom the next morning, she looked so pale, but asked me, "Ash, baby, you okay? Do you remember what happened last night?" And I had answered, "No, Mommy, but my arm hurts." She had seen deep bruises and cuts around my arms, but nobody else, including myself, could see them. Thinking back to it now, I think whatever was there that night scared all of the spirits in the house or on the property away, and nobody could help me at the time. Nothing like that happened again, but it was probably only one of the most terrifying experiences I've had. Thanks for reading my stories, and I hope you and your family are doing well. Are there more stories? Did you just hint that there were more stories? I had another story. I'm pretty sure I read it on here, of kids playing, and I think it was still called Ghost in the Graveyard. Was that like a childhood game? Or did you guys make it up and that was a weird coincidence? Because I swear, because I started reading this and I was like, I've read this story. Definitely did not. Alright, next story. This is Whit from Alabama again. I wrote in about the thing that impersonated my dog and thought I'd write in another story of my family's. My dad managed a trucking company, but before that he was on the road for a while and went to California one time. This time my mom and I were allowed to ride along with him since he was going to be gone for about a week. That would be fun. My grandfather used to drive a truck for, I'm not going to say the company. I was about to just tell y'all everything. He used to drive a tractor trailer, and I remember going on a few trips with him, and it was so fun. Both of these experiences took place in New Mexico before we made it to California. It was super hot, and around August when we went, and being a grumpy 16-year-old, I had headphones in and was reading a book in the back seat while my mom was in the passenger seat, almost asleep for the most part. Suddenly, my dad taps his brakes, and I sit up to see what's going on because he looked worried. When I asked him if there was a deer or an animal, he said, "Did you not see that guy?" My mom and I were both confused and said, "What guy?" Apparently, there had been a man in an orange shirt who walked from the yellow line up the middle of the road and ran to the other side of the road, where there was a concrete barrier. But when he made it to the concrete barrier, the man vanished and was gone. My dad and I are into more spooky things than my mom, and I immediately believed him because New Mexico is a creepy place, and I've been getting weird vibes all day. Our next experience happened, I believe, the next night at the truck stop. We were in what I believe was a Native American reservation town. There was a Love's truck stop, and that was basically it. Can you put truck stops in, on reservations? I mean, I guess you can if you get permission. I think there's casinos on reservations. Which I guess they didn't say the truck stop was on it. They said in a town that, okay. Sometimes random people, who most of the time appeared to be inebriated, would come and ask for money. My dad would offer to go buy them food from inside or a drink, and they'd always decline and just ask for the money, but we didn't keep cash on us. This one particular night, a Native American man walked over to our truck while my dad was getting some drinks out of the cooler, while my mom and I sat in the truck with the windows down. He asked my dad if he had any Gatorade, and my dad said, "No, I'm sorry," but offered him some water. The man looked like he could have cried as he thanked my dad. My dad handed him 2 bottles of water. The man then looked into the truck at my mom and I in the back seat and said, "May God bless you and your beautiful family." My dad said, "Thank you, and may God bless you too." This man shook my dad's hand and waved to us as he walked off to the truck parking area where truckers stopped to sleep. As he walked, I teared up watching him leave for some reason. He walked behind a truck so we all could see where his legs were behind the 18-wheeler behind the truck, and then his feet just disappeared. My dad was confused and walked over and looked around, but the man and the water bottles were both gone. My dad walked back over and told my mom that he had vanished, but I already knew that. Now, my family is very religious, and my dad quoted a verse from the Bible about how angels will walk amongst us, but the feeling I had that night was that it was the spirit of a Native American, and I asked silently in my head that if it was for me to see a sign. Our truck was parked on some railroad tracks behind the truck stop, and I raised up from my makeshift bed across from the front bench seats in the truck and looked outside. Standing beside the train tracks was a coyote just watching. I waved at it, and it looked like it nodded and took a few steps and vanished into the darkness. I don't know what my family saw or experienced on our road trip, but I believe it's safe to say that there's some truth to Native American legends. Thank you for all you and Eric do and for reading my story. Sorry it's so long. Much love. Wit. Why am I tearing up? Okay. Alright, next story. Hey Morgan, I hope you're feeling better. Infections suck. Anywho, it's Rose, and today I have 2 stories, one relatively like, ooh, don't love that, and one that I think is funny as a palate cleanser. Here's the first story. Can you tell the med students not to stare into my room? Remember last email when I went into vague detail about the year from hell that I almost did not make it? This is one of the 4 or 5 stories from that year alone. I was just moved from the ICU after coming out of a non-responsive state, and it was around 3 in the morning. Bad start, I know. Well, this was a teaching hospital, and I'm always happy to let medical students practice on me, as I've always been a little guinea pig my whole life. Might as well let the nice people learn. Anyways, ADHD moment. It was 3 a.m. and I'm watching something on TV when I see movement at the side of my eye. Now, my room had a big window with curtains. I didn't even think to ask to have the curtains closed. I look over, assuming it was a nurse, checking to make sure I was all right, breathing and all that fun stuff. Except there was a face too close to that window. Not pressed against it, but very close. They were really pale and almost like a weird glow. I thought it was a flashlight and just a med student since they looked so young, and I knew the nurses on that night. So when my nurse came in to give me medicine and make sure I was all right, I asked, "Hey, I don't mind the med students coming in, but can you ask them not to stare in my room? It makes me feel weird and creeps me out." The nurse Jack's, fake name for his privacy, as I do not have his consent nor do I know if he still works there, looked confused and says, "Rose, darling, are you all right? Was someone staring into your room? There's no med students on this floor tonight." I wasn't running a fever, nor was I still septic. Yes, the other nurses, and no one was staring into my room, nor did anyone match that description that I gave. The man I saw looked almost like he'd been wearing a white orderly uniform like seen in the movies. I barely slept that night and kept my curtains closed for the rest of my stay. Sounds like residual energy from, someone that passed in that hospital, maybe? Or someone that, just passed and worked there and stayed there? Second story. I did what now? This happened shortly before my 22nd birthday. I'm a September baby, so Halloween stuff is always out around the time of my birthday, and I love it. I worked at a grocery store that was haunted, and I'll tell y'all about that later. I saw an adorable skeleton spider statue, and the legs were posable. Me being a spooky little bitch, I had to have him, so I buy him and bring him home. Now, I'd been rearranging some guardians, but didn't think I was powerful enough or advanced enough to make one, so it was only 2 or 3 years into my practice. My mentor had held my hand up until now when I'd given more freedom and independence, so I put him on the snack drawers that I kept in my room for work. I had a roommate who was famous for stealing snacks, and I jokingly say, "I dub thee Cornelius, guardian of my snacks in my room." Witches can probably see where this is going. Well, I moved into my own apartment, and my mentor noticed spiritual spider webs and wards. She has sight, and it made sense. Then stares at Cornelius, now proudly displayed on my coffee table, and goes, "Oh, you made a home guardian. Congratulations." And I stare, buffering, and then go, "The freak you mean? I did no such thing." She proceeds to ask me what I'd said when I brought him home. And then she goes, "Yeah, you did. Apparently on accident, too." She still laughs at me to this day. P.S. I wanted to let y'all know that I saw some comments on the video where you read about my near-death experience and asked if I came back with any gifts. I wouldn't say I gained any new ones, but the ones that I already had were definitely much more strong and in my face. Cornelius? Okay, that's wholesome. That's wholesome. Well, anyways, that is all for today. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with me, and I will see you tomorrow.